Yes, hello everyone, and welcome to Forward, the podcast of the Forward Thinking Chiropractic Alliance. My name is Dr. Bobby Maybe, and just like you said, heard in the introductions, you can find out about the FTCA at forwardthinkingchiro.com. My guest today is not just a fantastic colleague, but I consider him one of my few friends in the profession. And not because this profession isn't full of friends. I'm just the kind of guy that has a very small circle of friends, and I want to include as many different types of people as possible. So one of my great chiropractic friends and admittedly bias admission business partner, Dr. Kevin Christie is here.
How
Welcome,
you doing?
Kevin. I'm great, man.
Thank you for
Okay,
the opportunity here.
so this podcast, I want it to be a love letter to the young chiropractors of our profession.
Mhm. I
That's
like that.
what that's where we're going today. When we usually podcast, we just push record and go. Sometimes
Yeah.
we might be like, what do you want to talk about today? What do you want to talk about? But this is going to be easy for us because
Mhm.
it's kind of where our focus outside of taking care of patients sort of started,
Yeah.
and where it definitely persists is like this concern,
Mhm.
care, um, passion for young chiropractors, and I guess what would you call it, like helping them see the light.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or from my point of view, it's there were things I didn't see when I was young as a chiropractor that caused pain, and it was like a real pain, a life pain that I didn't want other chiropractors to ever have to suffer because I was just being a dumbass. It wasn't. They were just blind spots I didn't see,
Yeah.
and it's just like a parent, right? You don't want your kids to suffer the same things you did, so you try to
Mhm.
tell them. They don't listen anyways, but you try to tell them, and
Yeah.
then we go from there. Now, you have expanded, of course, with modern chiropractic marketing and your skill set and your expertise, obviously into being a mentor to mid-career and even late career
Mhm.
chiropractors.
Mhm.
And so we should probably get into that in the podcast a little bit too. But I want this one to start with the young chiropractor.
Mhm.
And and instead of like going right into advice type stuff, did you have points of pain that hit you when you were young that caused you to go down this path? Or have you always
Mhm.
been sort of the leadership type?
No, I definitely wasn't the leadership type, and I wasn't the public speaking type. I always tell a story that when I was at Logan, we had something called the Health Awareness Workshop Team, and they were begging people to do that. We had to do Wednesday night talks to all the new patients in the student clinic, and I failed the team. You had to try out for it, and I did not pass. I didn't make it, and so I had to come back in 2 weeks and practice and make the team. And again, this wasn't like you know the Harvard debate team where it's competitive. They were begging for people to come do these health awareness workshop teams, and I didn't take it serious. I wasn't naturally good at speaking, but I obviously overcame it, and it ended up being pretty fruitful. And so I'm a big believer that leadership can be developed. Yeah, there's going to be some people that are born, a little more skilled at it inherently.
Sure.
There's no doubt about that. But you can provide a unique level of leadership, and I think it's worth dissecting a little bit because over my journey of trying to understand leadership, there's been a few things that I've come across. Is one is that there's different philosophies of leadership, right?
Right.
Uh, it doesn't have to be the you got ideas of say a General MacArthur, and you also got a Lee Iacocca, which are going to be your kind of charismatic, bigger than life leader. And then on the other side, you're going to have a Colin Powell, and you're going to have a CEO of a huge company you've never heard of before, and they're really good leaders. And there's just some different philosophies and personalities around leadership. I think we have this misconception that it has to be the charismatic leader that's rah rah like Tony Robbins,
Right.
and it doesn't always have to be that. So for me, it's been a little bit of a journey of getting comfortable with who I am and what leadership I can provide for chiropractors.
Oh, I think that's one thing that we've agreed on, and why in the Chiropractic Success Academy that we operate together, we've always recommended the Colby Index test or score,
Mhm.
as a way to personally measure how well you operate on a work level in certain categories so that you
Mhm.
understand yourself better because you can't fit that square peg into the round hole. You need to build a team around your weaknesses or your shortcomings,
Mhm.
even if you're developing them or you've come to the age where you're like, I'm just not going to be as a 7272. I'm just not going to be the one making spreadsheets. I'm just not that guy. So I need to build a team around of people who love spreadsheets, and I'll make stuff to fill them for sure. I
Exactly.
try to tell the young chiropractors quite often that they will find people who are just naturals at all of these different categories of business that we talk about, and they should not compare themselves to the naturals if they're not one of them.
Yep.
And you should be able to pretty easily self-identify if you're a natural or not. Um, so what we're going to do here in this little exercise is I'm going to name off 6 categories of business that I think are important.
Mhm.
And then you give 1 or 2 bullet points about each one of those topics that you've learned in your career
Mhm.
and in your management along the way. Um, it'll make it pretty easy because we started with this one first. Let's talk about leadership.
Mhm.
As a young chiropractor, even mid-career
Yep.
chiropractors are still developing their leadership as well. What
Mhm.
are 1 or 2 bullet points you can say about leadership? Now, leadership can also be mission, branding,
Yep.
direction. It doesn't just have to be the I'm the boss scenario.
Mhm. Yep.
But,
No, for sure. And I'm going to reference a book that really resonated with me I read it at 43. I'm 44 now, and it's called From Strength to Strength. And it may not be a read that would interest the 25-year-old right now. It definitely interests the folks on the back half or the back nine of life, like you and I are right now, right? But it talked about where you go from one strength in the first half of your life to the next strength. So from strength to strength. And so I want the younger DC to understand that they're in a current strength. It just looks different than what your strength is, Bobby, and what my strength is right now because we've been doing this for a while. We're on the back half here. And he talks about the difference between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So think fluid intelligence. Why did all the great rock and roll bands have all their hits in their 20s? And why are all the tech entrepreneurs in their 20s? And why, like, there's all these, like, the artists are in their 20s and so there's a lot of reasons for that. It's a fluid intelligence. You're new to this. You don't have your preconceived notions. You're not old grizzly, disenchanted veterans like you and I are in the profession and stuff. And so you've got this naive mindset, but it's like a beginner's mindset. And that's a strength in a lot of ways. And a crystallized intelligence is more of where you've got wisdom. And that's why a 65-year-old makes a great board member on a company, but maybe not the founder, right? The
right.
founders are typically going to be the founder CEO is going to be a little bit younger. And so that book was really good for me. And I remember reading it and it was great for my stage of my life now. But I also think to myself, I was like, God, I wish I would have read this at 25, 26, because I would have felt a little more comfortable in that particular strength that I was in back then that I'm not in now. And so I want the younger DC from a leadership standpoint to realize you have certain strengths of creativity, of hunger. You might be able to work a little bit longer and certain
Right.
things that the older DC is just in a different strength. There's nothing wrong with either one, but I think that's a big part of the young DC's leadership is understanding their unique strengths they have and not compare themselves to the strengths that you and I have, Bobby, or someone
Yeah.
that's in their 50s or 60s, because it's just impossible, especially when you have a tough profession like ours where you have to be really smart and to be really good clinically, it just ain't going to happen in the first 5 years. Like it's just not. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So you got to rely on your strengths of leadership and not compare to the ones that have been doing it for 20, 30 years.
And by good clinically, we mean not knowledge based. We mean
Yep.
the process of operating a patient from point A to point B in such an efficient manner and results oriented manner that
Mhm.
you just knock it out of the park every time you walk in the door.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. or the young chiros these days have such a large skill set,
Yep.
but
Mhm.
their way to manage that skill set isn't there yet.
They're great.
Yeah,
They're great chiropractors. They're
yeah,
great
no,
chiropractors,
absolutely.
but
And they're going
it's
to be
different.
better than us. That's the point,
Yep.
is this plasticity that they have, that if they
Yep.
do put in the hours and they do put in the focus, they're going to knock it out of the park much more than we ever could.
Exactly.
But not yet, my friends. Not yet. Another similar book would be, but it's a heftier read. But if anyone is listening to this and they're an entrepreneur mindset, it would be Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. But that book is kind of a heavy read. So if you're not a reader,
I wrote it on my notes.
oh, you did. Oh,
Can you
my
talk
bad.
about, can you, I want you to talk because you know it. Like, I think the young chiropractor, this is another thing I wish I knew. And I don't know if it falls under leadership, but it's just worth probably talking about is if you want to talk about the system one versus system two thinking and how like that was really eye opening in that book.
Yeah, well, so my interpretation of it, I think, would be too long for the scope of this
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, that one's tough because the book itself is like 1,300 pages, I think.
It's massive.
It's like
Yeah.
Tolkien, it's like Lord of the Rings or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if anyone wants to pick up YouTube and just system one, system two thinking, I mean, there are things that are going to come to you naturally and flow, and you're not going to have
Yeah.
to put too much thought process into it, and you think on instinct. And as a young chiropractor, the instinct for some is great,
Mhm.
but maybe not all. So you do see that with the young chiropractor, right? They want systems, rules,
Mhm.
sometimes even scripts. Tell me what to do and how to do it so that I
Yeah.
can fill in these blanks. I think the intuitive thinking process, you begin to trust it much more as you've seen enough repetitions.
Yeah.
And you as a baseball fan and me as a baseball fan, the analogy I use is that when you get better and better at it, when the pitcher releases the ball and you're the batter, you can start to see the spin and the
Mhm.
tread on the ball and the way it's spinning, and then you know how to swing at that pitch or to let it go.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you don't. You want a signal from the base coach. Swing on this one or hold your pitch. And then
Yes.
whatever happens, or hold your swing. Whatever happens, happens. And that's kind of like the system one, system two thinking.
Mhm.
There are times when you need deliberate thought processes,
Yeah.
and there are times where you just need to follow your intuition. And a lot of times that's really, I think, when it comes to dealing with people,
Mhm.
not what you're doing in clinic. In clinic, it is going to be very thought process oriented when you first start, and that's probably why you're not that great at it.
Mhm.
It's also why you're not going to mess up. So I did talk to Northeastern Chiropractic College a couple weeks ago, their students, and they were really concerned about messing up in clinic. And look, your school is going to prepare you tremendously to not hurt somebody. If you're paying attention and you do your job, you're not going to screw it up. That doesn't, though, mean that you're going to do a good job.
Mhm.
Like the management of the patient and knowing, between Jim the plumber who walks in and Mary the marathoner, and knowing how to behave between the two versus behaving exactly the same for both of them, that's a nuance that comes as you progress.
Yep. Absolutely.
He agrees. So we can go on to the next bullet point, which
Yep.
is, this one's right up your alley. It's marketing. So
Okay.
I gotta truncate you because you can go on for hours.
Yes. Yes.
One bullet point as a love letter to the young chiropractor about marketing.
Mhm. Um, there are credibility enhancing community outreach things that you can be doing versus the credibility detracting things that you may have swirling in your mind that you've seen chiropractors do for years, right? And so I think what's happened is a lot of young DCs that are in the evidence-based, evidence-informed crowd thinks of mall screenings and that type of stuff, chicken dinners, right? But there's a lot of really cool things that you can do out in the community. And I'm seeing my new associate do that. He's taking the bull by the horns. And I mean, he was out 3 different things last week. And one was at a tennis tournament over the weekend. One was a running event from a running shoe store. And the other one was he
Okay.
demoed our shockwave. And it's just like you can do really good stuff and you should be at that age. That's your strength. Like going back to it, that is your strength from a marketing standpoint is you have time and you have energy to do that. And you don't most likely have all the burdens of life that you and I do.
Perfect. Is the Instagram attention getting like crack video the mall screen of today.
Yeah, I, that's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, that's
I, I
7272 on the Colby, my friend. I think of
I
things,
think I think that's it. I think that's it.
which could be good,
Yes.
done good.
Yeah.
Mall screenings, probably somebody did them right somewhere, right?
Yes. And they
Like you could
got
probably
patience
make a
from
good, you could probably make a good mall screen. They get patients from them, and that's always that's the bottom line, right?
it.
For some people, not for me. Okay, number three, sales.
Yeah.
Sales is a bullet. What do you got?
Yes. I want your sales to be more like they are pre-sold when they come in and they're compelled what you're offering to them, and you're doing it in a clinically minded way. I had David Rudnick on my podcast, and he does a great job at selling what he sells, but it's not really selling. It's just clinically guided confidence. There's a need that that patient has. It's a product market fit, and it's priced at a point that enough people can handle that, and they see the value in it. And when he educates them, not over educates them, but directs them, provides leadership to the patient, and says, if you want your Achilles tendinosis to get better in 2 or 3 weeks instead of 4 to 6 weeks, this is what I recommend. Boom. And that's it. Right. It's not a dog and pony show, and it's not a hard sales job, but they've got to be pre sold and compelled.
Sales is leadership. And by the
It
way,
is.
so that social media can be considered sales because you're building trust if you're
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
air quotes the right way. Your
Yeah.
associates attending, running, doing shockwave demos, that is
Yeah.
sales, as in that it's leadership and it's demonstrating likability and trust and all that.
Yeah.
In a pre-sales model where you're not trying to hit them with a shtick or a line at the end to close a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned pricing, and that's the next bullet point. So the next bullet point is pricing, product placement, and
Yeah.
adding extra products and services into your practice, which I know is a hot topic for you right now.
It is, because it's one of my things I'm excited about for chiropractors, even the ones that are in network in states where it doesn't reimburse well. But I'm a big believer in avoiding the commoditization trap and charging what you're worth. Now, what happens is if you charge a lot of money, like let's say I had James Spencer on my podcast, and he's $500 an hour now. Um, you're going to have a very small percentage of people that can afford that. And so, yeah, your hourly capacity might be cool on how much you can make per hour, but do you have enough volume coming in? Like if you get $500 an hour, but you only got 5 people coming in a week, doesn't add up. And what I'm seeing happening is too many people trying to run a high ticket model of pricing, and they, going back to what you said, they're a younger DC, and they haven't built up um they're not positioned yet as an expert in their community.
They
If
haven't
you
built
go
the
back,
floor. Yeah, they don't have a floor for that ceiling.
correct. Yeah. And it takes time, and like you got to be able to position yourself to do that. And so I think the pricing model has to be congruent with your skill set and expertise in the eyes of the beholder of the community, and where enough people can afford that. Now, if you've built up and you're someone that's like a great cook or whatever, like you can definitely charge more, and there's enough people that are willing to pay that. But the problem becomes is if you haven't gotten there yet and you try to charge 300, 400, $500 a session, then it becomes a massive sales job to try to overcome the fact that the value is in the eyes of the beholder, that customer, they don't see it as value. They see it as too expensive. And so to overcome that, you have to really sell hard to do that. Whereas someone like James Spencer has been in this for a long time. He started out at $100, $150. Like he incrementally increased as his expertise and his positioning improved over time. And now people are pre-sold and actually see the value in paying this gentleman for an hour worth of his time.
A value game instead of an extraction game, which is the sales thing we want to avoid, is the extraction sales approach versus I've built enough value that it sells itself. People want it already. People want it walking in the door.
Mhm.
Does Dr. Spencer have a specific target type of patient? Because I notice in the
Yeah.
world of really high dollar, high ticket, like
Mhm.
Greg Rose, obviously
Yep.
Tiger Woods era golf. He was back then he was $600 an
Mhm.
hour or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Does he have a specific target as well?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's very important to it because A, he's in a very affluent area, which is in Wellington, Florida, which is about 45 minutes here. My folks actually live there, and it's an insanely wealthy equestrian town,
Yeah.
and so people like Bill Gates's daughter have horses there, and so there's a big equestrian and polo. So the polo athletes and the things of that nature. Now he has other athletes too, so I'm not pigeonholing him to that, but that was a big that's an area where he's made a really good niche for himself for sure.
But he ain't no generalist in the same shopping center
No.
as a Costco.
And he's transcended the profession, right? So,
Yeah.
and I'm just using him as an example because he was on my podcast. He's talked about it before, and you can extrapolate out to other people that have transformed the profession, like Greg Rose and Great Cooks and stuff. He does a lot with Perform Better, and he's become an industry expert and things like that. And so there to be able to command certain prices a lot of times is when you've also transcended your profession.
Yes, very true. Next one is I got to go from memory. Back office management.
Mhm.
And so it's a different brand of leadership. Now we're actually talking about hiring, firing,
Yeah,
creating a
and it
team.
And it, like to your point, yeah, it is a different level of leadership, and it's some people are struggle to make that leap, but it makes you even better. And then when you start to hire and allow to focus on the things that you're really good at and get energy, this is when you can do this for many years. And so going back to the younger DC, you got to start looking and building things in place that are going to allow you to do this for 30, 40 years, not just 5 or 10, and you got to start getting good at that and figuring out the hiring and firing. And one of the things that I'm excited about for a lot of chiropractors that offer certain ancillary services and maybe rehab is the idea of the Swiss Army person or the Swiss Army CA, where traditionally it might have been just you, then you hired a front desk person, then you hired a clinical CA, then you hired an associate. That's still a very good model, but you might have to say, you know what, I need a Swiss Army and they're going to work front desk, but they're also going to help with rehab. And if I'm available, I'm going to go, like, it's this floating team of two that's able to handle almost everything. And then as you get to that next level of busy and profit, then you can maybe hire a delineated front desk person and still have your clinical CA.
The doctors in Oregon will be very familiar with this sort of concept since our CAs are licensed and regulated. So
Mhm.
typically, a very common pathway to becoming a CA is to be a very efficient and contributing
Mhm.
front office worker, and then go through the CA certification process. So
Yep.
it fits really well to what we do in Oregon, but that is a great pipeline to create a
Mhm.
tremendous team member. This category also has operations management.
Yep.
So I'll just ask you a question as somebody
Mhm.
who practices and has had multiple practices, and we could
Mhm.
even do a podcast on that one. How much time or what do you got for a bullet point for operations management?
Yep. Yep. I would love for you to work on your business 2 to 5 hours a week. And then I need you to have a meeting and slash training cadence of a weekly team meeting. I definitely got to have that. I want you to have a quarterly meeting that's maybe 2 to 3 hours long each quarter to plan for the next quarter. And I want you to have a big yearly meeting that might be a little longer, like 3 to 4 hours to plan out for the year. I want you to have that at a minimum. So again, that's a weekly team meeting that might be 15 to 30 minutes, depending on your team size, and then a quarterly and a yearly. And then you can then from there, if you've got team members, is you want to also sprinkle in trainings, which are a little bit different than meetings. And then we do something in our office called a pre-shift huddle. So 10 minutes before the shift. So like Monday, we have two shifts, the morning and the afternoon. We meet at 8:50 before our 9 a.m. start and at 1:50 before our 2 p.m. start. And we go through the patients that are on the schedule and try to stage it and prepare for it. And like, is this a re-exam? Does this patient need to be referred out? Where are they at on their treatment plan? Let's change up the exercise, progression, regression stuff. And we kind of hammer that so that when they come in, we're ready for them. Kind of like you see at a restaurant sometimes the whole staff, wait staff has a pre-shift meeting to like go over some things in the menu and stuff like that.
Yeah, when I was the family, we took a vacation to Mexico, and one of these sort of like culinary all-inclusives, where
Mhm.
you got to make reservations, but you can go to these fantastic restaurants all throughout the resort. And we were in the pool right by one of the restaurants, and like they're in there. My wife's like,
Yeah.
they're in there. Why isn't the restaurant open? They're just in there talking. I'm like, oh, they're preparing for this evening.
Yeah.
And they probably know who's a problem child on that list of
Yes, exactly.
reservations. They probably know who's
Yeah.
going to ask for a little bit extra. And all they know when you walk in who's the speed bump and who's the speed demon.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Last bullet of these six is cash flow,
Mhm. Mhm.
office cash flow.
Uh, yeah, it's king, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I like the saying is volume is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality, right? Um, and I don't know who said it, but it wasn't me, and I'm not going to take credit for it. But it's important, and I've really honed in on a lot of that. And there's two things, right? There's cash flow, and then there's profit margin. And I think that you got to be careful of, and you got to have good parameters around that for sure. But one of the things that you can do to protect your cash flow is that when you have really good months, don't just go and spend it, but maybe put it into a sinking fund so that if you do run into a little bit of a cash flow crunch, because they're all going to happen. I don't care how, like, I talk to chiropractors that have $1 million practice and they run into cash flow crunch things, bigger zeros, bigger problems sometimes, right? And so one of the things I really talk to chiropractors about is to understand when you're going to have some dips in your cash flow potentially, and prepare for that with a sinking fund so that you can rest a little easier with it. But try to leave yourself some margin in your business, and that's the one thing. If I go back in time, is when I opened my own practice at age 30. From age 30 to 35, I used to run it pretty hot, and I was growth. I was growth. Like I want to do this. Like I would run it hot.
You were young and
And
plastic, yeah.
yes, I was doing in plastic. And I had a good first 5 years of my practice, and it was great. It was good growth. And then when the insurance reimbursement hammered down on me, um, running it hot had its consequences in there. And I've shared that in my podcast before. I'm glad I went through it now because I'm like super understanding of of how all that can work, because everybody gets it wrong
Yeah,
at some point. Even like, even if you think about it, right? Even multi billion dollar companies get it wrong sometimes,
absolutely.
and they're
Absolutely.
paying zillions of dollars for CFOs that are world class, and they get it wrong. So we can't beat ourselves up if we get it wrong occasionally.
Which begs the question, is it a leading or trailing indicator sometimes? You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good
sometimes the
point.
times are changing and the cash flow numbers will sort of let you know, they'll inform you. Post
It will.
haste, not pre.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So these six bullet points that we just went through:
Mhm.
leadership, marketing, sales, products or product expansion and management, pricing, overhead and operations, and cash flow are the six most common areas where a small business, or in this case, a practice, will fail. And they do. And it's one of these six things will sink a practice or a small business. Or as we talked about in your podcast when it was on a while back, sometimes it won't sink you completely, but it will cause you to languish painfully for years if you don't get a
Yep.
grasp on these things. So, as a young chiropractor, these six topics are ones that you really want to focus on. Either if you're a natural, move past it and really focus putting an effort in the ones you have to put effort in to be
Mhm.
competent. These six are also, by the way, Kevin, I don't know if you just noticed what I did there, but these six in the Chiropractic Success Academy are the six chapters of the Double Your Revenue Challenge that we're doing. So members of the CSA get focused training in these six categories so they can start to shore that up. Wasn't that nice? You like what I did
I
there?
like that. I like that. I wanted to, because I just wanted to touch on a little bit is sometimes you got to look at certain things like the scaffolding of your business. You're building it like you're building a building, and you'll see the scaffolding around it. Um, and I think things like Cairo Up should be the scaffolding of your business. I think, Obviously your EHR is going to be a
Right.
scaffolding of your business.
Right.
But I really think that the Chiropractic Success Academy can be that scaffolding for a business, of really having a resource that's with you consistently, to help you with these things around marketing and business, and having that scaffolding around it to where you can keep on getting better. And I want to challenge the evidence informed chiropractor, because we know that you're clinically minded. We want you to be clinically minded. All of our members are clinically minded, but it doesn't mean you can't also be good at business. And I heard a good example of what it means to be good at business, because all these six things would make for a great business and be good at business. And
Yeah.
so if you get good at this would be great. But it's also, the being good at business as a doctor just means you have a phenomenal patient experience.
Yeah.
But the things that take a great patient experience are all these things as
All
well.
these
Like, you got
things.
to
Yes.
provide great leadership to them. If you're not, I don't care how good you are at ART or manipulation or rehab, like, they're not going to get a great experience. If the pricing isn't right for them and it's all off the map and it's not great, and it's just not going to be a great experience. So you could take all six of those, and that's going to be great patient experience, which is going to be great business. And that's all we're trying to get these evidence-informed chiropractors to do, frankly.
And it's taken years to kind of hone that message into them, right? Like, you don't have to be afraid of these conversations. They're important
No.
conversations that can be ethical and patient centered.
Yep.
Yeah. I have one more thing as we close.
Mhm.
This always happens when we podcast. You see like a Facebook post right before we go on and go like, we got to talk about that thing. And let me pull up my little notes here. So a little backstory for everybody, because nobody really knows who I am or what I do, but I am also a high school basketball referee. And in that journey, depending on where we're in basketball town. So we're in Beaverton, Oregon, the Portland metro area. We have an NBA team. Basketball's big around here. And every kid is playing, but there's 100 games a weekend all year round. They don't stop playing basketball. And when basketball's over, they start with more basketball. And so the referee, I mean, their ultimate goal is, my ultimate goal would be like Division II college, Division III college, small college referee. Like, referees aspire to that. The
Mhm.
being an NBA referee would be like being in the NBA. It's not going to happen for most of us. But if we're really good at what we do, we can aspire to these things like junior college, low ball college, high level varsity playoff basketball, things like that. When we work together as a team, it's really satisfying, because there's a lot of, depending on your teammates, on your other referees, there's a lot of like standards and expectations of you to show up for your team member. And there's a lot of sharing. And every time you step on the court or go to a camp or have some sort of practice, there's always something new to learn from the people around you. Always, every time I'm around another referee, I learn something new. I would say for myself, and maybe folks like Jay Greenstein, yourself, there's a list of people I can name that they also get better. Taylor Premer, the list is not exhaustive. It's kind of medium short, of people that I know that when they're around other people, the Motion Palpation Institute breeds this in their program, right? You can get
Mhm.
better around other people. Other people will make you better if you hang around them and you practice and you learn and you challenge each other. As a young chiropractor, I I see you, as you young chiropractors that I'm talking to, I see you wanting to go and do your own thing, air quotes.
Mhm.
You want to go into your own little space. You want to be the master of your own domain. And I get
Mhm.
that, because I was there too. I want to be my own boss. That's what attracts you to being a chiropractor. I can do it my way. I can run my own
Mhm.
business. I am pleading to you from the other side of the wall, from experience. Don't let that mentality absorb you.
Mhm.
Don't do it. Don't be the king of your own island. Constantly get on the court with people better than you, who are going to point out to you, you did that wrong. Here's how to do it better. You could do this thing better if you can master this if you just did it this way. If you go home in the mirror and you do this 20 times in a row, you practice your hand signals, you practice your ROF, whatever it is, you go home and practice, you'll be better. We need more of that in the culture of our profession. This is where you get to chime in about the modern chiropractic marketing mastermind group and what kind of lessons they learn in that vein. When those chiropractors who are high level, they're operating at a high level, but they're in a group with other people higher operating at a high level. What happens in that room when that sort of thing happens?
Yeah, I'll just say two things. And one, the context of it is that everybody keeps a beginner's mindset. And the two things I'll say was that's been pretty eye-opening for it was one was, Mark King joined the mastermind from the beginning and was with us for a couple years with it. And this is someone that 63, but I mean, huge, awesome, amazing practice. And he was fully entrenched into the mastermind and learning and asking questions and getting better. We have two other 60 plus year olds in our group, and so there's a lot of 50-year-olds, a lot of 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds too. But it's been cool to see people that have been doing this for a long time open up and share and be vulnerable and try to keep growing, even though they've got really cool, great practices. So that's one thing that's been pretty cool. And then the second thing that's happened since we've taken it out of Florida is we've had members hop into other members' clinic because their clinic might, like, we were in Nashville and Jason Holmes up there. And so Kurt dropped by his, and Anthony Hussein has practice not too far from there. And so one of our members went and shadowed his clinic. We're going to be in Chicago next. Same things happening there. We got a couple members in the area. So it's pretty cool to see that these are all very established, great practices, and they're trying to learn from each other. And they've avoided being on that island. And that's what's been pretty cool to see within the mastermind group for sure.
Also, as an aside, it's obligatory that I say things like this as a person who works for my state board. All the people who
Mhm.
get in trouble
Yeah.
almost notoriously always are doctors who practice on an island, unconnected to other people. Not a literal island. A young chiropractor, so literal. Not a literal island, not like Hawaii or, like Catalina Island. They practice on a virtual island where they are not connected
Yeah.
to other people whatsoever, other chiropractors. Sometimes they don't even have other staff members to get feedback from. Reach out, be part of something, have conversations, always have that beginner mindset, and you're going to do great. That's it, man.
I love it. I really appreciate it. This is great.
I put you on the hot seat. I didn't tell you anything that we were
I
going to talk
know.
about, but I knew that you're a master of this domain, so I had no issue whatsoever that you would know exactly how to respond
I
to
thought
the
we were talking
challenge.
about baseball and then you come at me with all these questions, but I appreciate it.
It'd be a lot cooler if we were, but we'll do that sometime around October, right?
Yes. When the Braves blow it again.
And that's the funny to keep this podcast evergreen. It doesn't matter what October we talk about. We'll talk about baseball. The Braves and the Dodgers will blow it. So, all right. Thank you very much.